What would you do if the woman you trusted most, the one you promised your life to, was caught humiliating someone who had served your home with loyalty and silence for years? Tonight, you'll witness the moment a millionaire walked in on his wife mistreating their maid, and the decision he made that no one in the world could have predicted. Ethan Miller's mornings began before the sun made up its mind. At 6 a.m., his eyes opened as if pulled by a quiet pulley inside his chest, the same way they had every day since his first gym opened 15 years ago. He didn't need an alarm. His body had memorized success and stitched it into his sleep. He padded across heated hardwood floors to the wall of windows that overlooked the neighborhood greenbelt in North Dallas. The gated community was quiet at this hour. Sprinklers whispered, a lone runner clicked past on the sidewalk, and somewhere a garbage truck announced itself with a groan. Ethan stood still, hands on hips, watching the sky lift from bruise purple to a clean Texas blue. He liked this threshold, the daily reset. It reminded him the world could be ordered if you were disciplined enough to meet it early. Coffee first. He ground beans Carla kept in a sealed glass jar, labeled Ethan, medium roast, 2 scoops, and poured water measured to the ounce. Carla's neat handwriting on masking tape lived on half the things in his kitchen: drawer, utensils, frequent, cabinet, mugs, left, filters, top bin. He didn't ask her to do it. She just had. That was Carla, anticipation masquerading as labeling. While the machine hissed, he opened his phone to the dashboard for Titan Fit, the fitness brand he'd built from a 900-square-foot studio near SMU into a regional empire across Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and New Mexico. Overnight numbers looked good. Month-to-date memberships up 7.8%, attrition lower than forecast, a successful soft launch for the Titan Fit Reset program in Austin. A quiet pride warmed him. Numbers, not noise, were the music he trusted. By 6:20 he was lacing shoes in the home gym. A rower faced a mirrored wall. Barbells stood at attention. An oxygen green neon sign read, "Work for it," a gift from his best friend Ryan Cole, who'd once taped over it with a post-it that said, "Or don't, you'll just buy it." Ethan had laughed harder than he'd wanted to. Money had started shielding him like tempered glass. Jokes like Ryan's kept hairline cracks in it, and Ethan was grateful. He warmed up with 10 minutes at a casual pace, then a strength circuit, a familiar choreography that steadied his head. Between sets, his gaze kept drifting to the framed photo near the sound system, him and Lauren at a charity gala in Uptown. She wore black satin with a low back, her brown hair in a sleek twist. His hand rested at the small of her back in a way that said both "I'm here" and "I can afford to be." The camera had caught them mid-laugh, all teeth and ease. When donors had asked for a couple to front the Children's Wellness Fund last year, the committee hadn't even voted. Lauren and Ethan were the brochure come to life. He showered and changed into a navy polo and grey slacks, work uniform casual. Downstairs the house woke fully. The thermostats ticked. The Sub-Zero hummed. A diffuser released a soft eucalyptus ribbon. Carla again, on a schedule she kept in her head. She'd already been through. The marble counters were dry, the stainless spotless. A small bouquet of grocery store tulips sat in a water glass by the sink. He hadn't bought tulips since his mother died. But Carla had filed a comment he'd made in passing. Mom loved these. And somehow here they were most Mondays. He heard the side door open and the light, nearly soundless steps he'd come to recognize. Carla never entered like she owned air. She negotiated with it. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said, stopping just inside. She was 34, medium height, hair pulled back into a low bun that said practical more than style. Today she wore a pale blue scrub top and jeans. Her off-brand uniform and hands already smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. "Morning, Carla." He gestured to the coffee she'd set out in his mug. Exactly the way he liked it. One ice cube to drop the temperature. "You beat me to it." "You beat me to the trash," she answered, not smiling but softer for having noticed. "I'll take the bins down after I start the wash." You have a 9:30 at the Plano Club, then the vendor call at 11. The dry cleaner left the suits. I put them in the dressing room. He blinked. He hadn't told her about Plano or the vendor call. He didn't have to. Carla listened when Ryan joked, when Lauren gushed, when Ethan thought aloud on the phone. She collected information the way other people collected recipes, then used it to make the day go down smooth. "Thanks," he said, and meant it. Carla nodded, already opening the fridge to inventory dairy with an almost ceremonial efficiency. Lauren usually drifted down later, after the house had been polished into a backdrop, but this morning she appeared early, barefoot in a silk robe the color of fresh cream, phone in hand, lashes perfect. Lauren woke photo-ready. Some people claimed she had a New York face, poised, symmetrical, a glance that measured rooms like they were runways. She kissed Ethan's cheek, murmured something about a sponsor breakfast, and placed a green juice on the counter as if setting down a prop. "Good morning." "Carla," Lauren said, voice even, eyes already sliding to a notification. "Morning," Carla answered. Neutral. Ethan felt the familiar tug, tension light as dental floss, between the two women who anchored his life at home. Lauren, with her public shine and private selectivity. Carla with her quiet competence and refusal to take up space. He'd always written it off as different worlds. He'd grown up in a small house in Garland, where his mother chatted with everyone. Mail carrier, deli clerk, substitute teacher. Lauren wasn't like that. He'd told himself there was room in adulthood for different kinds of grace. By 7:45 he was on the road, the Porsche gliding down the tollway, sun bright over a stretch of office parks and glassy towers. He called Ryan. "You sound chipper," Ryan said. Background noise suggested he was pouring cereal with one hand and wrangling a mutt with the other. Ryan lived in East Dallas, rented, and liked to say his net worth was mostly books and bad decisions. "Numbers are strong," Ethan said. "We might beat Q3 by a mile." "Look at you, Mr. Mile. How's the Queen?" Ryan meant Lauren. He always had. "Busy? Big week. Dior something tonight. Or maybe it's Fendi." Ryan said, chewing. "Still feel like she's, I don't know, oxygen or perfume." Ethan smiled despite himself. "What does that even mean?" "Oxygen is life. Perfume is presentation. Hard to tell the difference when the bottle's pretty and you're in a fancy room. You're impossible." "I'm consistent," Ryan said. "I like you best at 6 a.m. rowing alone, not at 10 p.m. on a step and repeat." Ethan didn't answer. He thought about the ring in the company safe, a cushion-cut diamond, sitting in velvet like a quiet yes. He pictured proposing in Breckenridge, snow falling, Lauren's eyes glossy in the cold. He wanted children, dogs, mess, Christmas morning disarray. He wanted to stitch chaos to order and call it a home. At the Plano Club, managers lined up membership reports, and Ethan moved through them with a pen that clicked when he was pleased. His leadership style was precise without being cruel. He coached like he lifted, form first, then volume. Employees respected him, and more importantly, they didn't fear him. He studied a complaint about towel shortages, approved a small budget for extra laundry pickups, and pitched a Saturday community hour where non-members could attend a class free if they brought a canned good. Philanthropy had helped tighten Fit's brand. Also, it reminded Ethan of the boy he'd been, the one who needed a ride to practice because his mum was double shifting. By late morning, he was back in the car. Lauren texted a photo from a downtown hotel, spotless conference room, white orchids, her lanyard just visible. "Sponsorship brunch going great. You'd be proud. Tonight 7, Dolce on Maple." He thumbed a heart, then typed "perfect," and felt the odd distance of texting a life that already looked perfect. At 12:30, he cut through a quiet neighborhood for a salad at a cafe where the owner still cleared tables herself. He liked places like that. Human scale, no PR kit, just people working. He thought of Carla taking 2 buses in July heat, rather than asking him for a ride or an advance. He'd offered before. She'd refused with a respectful insistence that had been hard to challenge. He'd raised her pay twice in 5 years and added health coverage. Still, he suspected she hid things, worry about her mother's appointments. A second job occasionally, the sort of fatigue you don't name because naming it makes it heavier. By mid-afternoon, clouds stacked over the Trinity like a warning. He wrapped the vendor call early and drove home before the summer storm hit, the wipers metronoming. He pulled into the garage, the door closing behind him with a satisfying seal. A quiet he loved waited on the other side of the mudroom. Home silence, not loneliness. The difference dictated by whether you believed you were chosen. He shrugged off his jacket, loosened his collar, and stepped toward the kitchen to find a protein bar. He heard voices before he reached the doorway. Not voices exactly, one voice, cutting and controlled, a blade wrapped in silk. "Do you really think you belong here?" Lauren's tone floated coolly through the air, a temperature drop in August. "This is not your kind of house. You're here because Ethan is generous, not because you deserve it." Ethan stopped mid-step, keys quieting in his hand. The quality of the words was worse than the words themselves, the practiced dismissal of someone used to stage managing rooms. Carla's reply was a whisper he could barely catch. "I'm just doing my job, Ms. Parker. Look at me when I'm speaking to you." A hard pause. "You walk around like you own the place. Little notes, your systems, your opinion of where things go. It's cute. And it ends now." Ethan's ribs tightened around his lungs. He had never heard Lauren speak with that temperature. He'd heard indifference, yes. Cool critique, yes. But not this. Humiliation as performance for an audience of two. He pushed the door with more force than he meant. It snapped against the stopper, and both women turned. Lauren's face rearranged itself in a beat. Surprise, then relief, then the smile she used for donors and photographers. Carla's hands worked a dish towel like it was the edge of a cliff. "Hey," Lauren said brightly. "I thought you were in Plano till 5. What's happening?" Ethan asked, voice even, the evenness sweating. "Nothing," Lauren said with a laugh too high-end. She spilled coffee on the living room rug. "I overreacted." "It's fine." Ethan scanned the spotless counters, the empty sink, the absence of any aroma but citrus cleaner. The lie was gentle as a silk rope, and for the first time he felt it burn. Carla didn't speak. She shrank back toward the pantry like walls could swallow decent people whole. Something delicate in Ethan began to splay. A set of small assumptions, 100 micro-forgivenesses, a worldview that had let different personalities explain away cruelty when cruelty was efficient. The room felt misaligned, like he had stepped 5 degrees into a parallel life where the same quartz counter reflected different truths. "Carla," he said, eyes on her, not on Lauren, "you can take a break. I've got it in here." She nodded once, a soldier dismissed, and slipped down the hall with the silence of someone who learned long ago that footsteps can be held against you. Lauren moved to kiss his cheek. He leaned back by instinct rather than plan. A white space opened between them, small, barely visible unless you knew them well. But Ethan felt it like a draft under a locked door. He went upstairs without lunch, took a shower in the dark, and sat on the edge of his bed with the towel around his waist, listening to the house exhale. His phone buzzed with a photo of Lauren in a mirror, pout, robe tied at the waist, caption, "Dinner later, wear the navy suit." He stared until the screen dimmed, and for the first time, the curated charm made his skin itch. For years, Ethan had believed perfection was a matter of calibration. Tighten here, adjust there, the way he coached a squat or a rollout. But as the afternoon drained into evening, he realized some things didn't misalign. They revealed the line between oxygen and perfume blurred. Then it didn't. He could smell the difference now, downstairs. Carla would reset the table the way she always did, placemats aligned to the table's seam, napkins folded to Beckett-neat rectangles, fork tines parallel as train tracks. She would leave tulips in a glass by his nightstand because Monday was 3 days away and maybe this week needed flowers early. And Lauren would step into a dress that photographed well and talk about a guest list, as if joy was something you could RSVP. And Ethan would nod, because habit is a muscle too, but somewhere between the thud of a door and the hush of a breath, something inside him had stepped back from the edge of the picture and noticed the frame. and once you see the frame, you can't unsee it. The evening would end without a fight, without a scene, without anything he could point to as evidence. The smallest betrayals rarely come with receipts. They come with tone. The storm rolled over Dallas after sunset, rain ticking like coins on slate. Ethan lay awake longer than he meant to, the house so impeccable it felt staged. He could hear the dishwasher's low churn, the dryer's soft click, the security system's blue light measuring the dark. Somewhere, a plan he'd never needed to have began assembling itself out of habit and hurt, piece by piece, quiet as rain. The morning after the confrontation in the kitchen felt different from every morning Ethan Miller had known in his immaculate Dallas mansion. For years, his life had been defined by order, routines that clicked into place like well-oiled gears. The coffee brewed just right, the gym session completed, the day's schedule unfolding with predictable efficiency. But now, even before his eyes opened, he sensed a shift. He woke earlier than usual, around 5:30, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together fragments of the night before. The image of Lauren standing over Carla with her arms crossed, spitting out words laced with superiority, replayed in his mind on a loop. He could still hear her tone, sharp, dismissive, cruel. And then Carla's silence, that lowered gaze, the way she seemed too used to swallowing insults, too resigned to fight back. That silence hurt more than Lauren's words. He rose from bed quietly, careful not to disturb Lauren, who slept, turned away from him, her breathing even and calculated, as if she could even choreograph dreams. He padded into the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and studied his reflection. There he was, Ethan Miller, successful entrepreneur, respected businessman, admired fiancé, and yet the man staring back looked unsettled, hollow around the eyes. By the time he reached the kitchen, the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed last night's tension. Usually by now, Carla would already have the coffee brewed, a faint oldies station playing softly in the background, but the kitchen was silent. He walked in slowly, unsure of what he would find. Carla stood at the sink, quietly rinsing fruit. She didn't look up when he entered, though she must have heard his footsteps. Her hair was tied back, her posture stiff, her hands moving methodically. He watched for a moment before speaking. "Carla," he said gently. She paused, dried her hands on a towel, and finally turned. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." The formality stung. She rarely called him that. Usually it was just Mr. Ethan, or sometimes nothing at all, just a nod paired with her steady competence. Today it was armor. "About last night," Ethan began, unsure how to phrase what pressed against his chest. "That wasn't right. I saw everything." Carla lowered her gaze again, her lips pressed tight. "Don't worry, sir." "It's fine." "No," Ethan insisted, stepping closer. "It's not fine. That wasn't a simple argument or a mistake. That was—" He stopped himself. The words he wanted to use, humiliation, cruelty, abuse, felt too heavy to drop so suddenly. That wasn't the way anyone should be treated. Especially not you. Carla's shoulders lifted slightly, then fell. "It's the way things are sometimes. I've worked in harder houses. At least here no one has hit me. Miss Parker, she's difficult, yes, but I need this job." Her voice trembled on the last few words, though she tried to disguise it with a half-smile that convinced no one. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He'd always considered himself attentive, a man who noticed details, who managed his empire because he never ignored the small things. And yet here, in his own home, he'd been blind. He hadn't noticed how often Carla avoided eye contact, how often her movements became smaller in Lauren's presence. He hadn't seen it, or hadn't wanted to. "Carla," he said firmly, his tone carrying the authority he usually reserved for boardrooms. "You are not here to be anyone's punching bag. You are here because you do your job better than anyone I've ever seen. You've kept this house alive for years. You've earned respect. If Lauren can't see that, that's her problem, not yours." Carla swallowed hard. Her hands twisted the towel nervously, and for a second Ethan thought she might cry. But she didn't. She simply nodded once, the way soldiers acknowledge orders, and turned back to the sink. The rest of the morning dragged with a strange heaviness. Ethan sat at the dining table with his untouched coffee, staring at the steam curling upward. He thought of Ryan, his best friend since high school, the one person who always dared to question things he didn't want to question. Ryan had warned him about Lauren. Perfume, not oxygen, he'd said. At the time, Ethan had laughed it off. Now, it echoed. When Lauren finally came downstairs, it was almost 9 hours. She floated into the room in a satin robe, hair glossy, makeup already perfect, as though the day had a red carpet waiting. She smiled brightly when she saw Ethan. "Morning, love," she said, leaning to kiss his cheek. He stiffened slightly but allowed it. "Morning." She glanced at the coffee, then at Carla, who was quietly wiping the counter. "Oh, thank you, Carla," she said, with a sweetness that sounded like glass about to crack. Ethan noticed the difference immediately. This wasn't kindness. This was performance. A mask. The day went on with a forced normalcy. Ethan drove to the Titanfit headquarters, but his mind wandered through spreadsheets and phone calls. He thought about Carla's lowered eyes, about Lauren's icy voice, about the possibility that this one moment in the kitchen wasn't isolated. How many times had this happened when he wasn't there? How much had Carla endured in silence while he was away? By late afternoon, Ethan called Ryan. "Something's wrong," Ethan said. "Talk to me," Ryan replied. His tone immediately serious. Ethan recounted what he'd witnessed in the kitchen, how Lauren's mask had slipped, how Carla had borne it with the resignation of someone used to it. Ryan didn't interrupt. When Ethan finished, there was a long pause on the line. "I told you," Ryan said quietly. "She's not what she pretends to be. You saw it now." That wasn't perfume slipping, it was poison showing. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I don't know what to do yet." "You'll figure it out," Ryan said. "Just don't ignore it anymore. Once you've seen someone's real face, you can't go back to believing the mask." That night, the silence in the house felt oppressive. Lauren chatted about an upcoming fashion event, about a dinner party, about a new pair of heels she wanted to order. Ethan nodded, smiled at the right places, played the part of the attentive fiancé. But inside, a seed had been planted. Doubt, distrust, a question he couldn't shake. What else don't I know? Carla moved around the house like a shadow, quieter than usual, efficient as ever. But Ethan noticed everything now. The slight tremor in her hands when she set down plates. The way she avoided being in the same room as Lauren for more than a moment. When he finally went to bed, Ethan lay awake beside Lauren, who scrolled on her phone, laughing softly at something on Instagram. He stared at the ceiling, his mind heavy with realization. His perfect life wasn't perfect. His dream of family, of stability, of trust, it had been built on a foundation he wasn't sure could hold. The night stretched on, the sound of rain tapping against the window. Ethan realized this was no longer about one cruel comment in a kitchen. This was about seeing the truth behind the gloss, about recognizing that the woman he thought he loved might be someone else entirely, and in the quiet dark. As Lauren finally drifted to sleep beside him, Ethan made himself a silent promise. He wouldn't ignore the signs anymore. He would watch, he would listen, and when the time came, he would act. But he had no idea how deep the betrayal ran, nor how much his world was about to unravel. The storm outside had passed, but inside Ethan Miller's home, the air still carried an unshakable heaviness. When morning arrived, the sunlight spilled through the tall windows, as though trying to disinfect the unease that had settled there. Yet for Ethan, the brightness felt hollow. His routines unfolded, but they no longer offered comfort. The rhythm of life had been broken, and every step reminded him of the fracture. He rose early again, restless. By 6 a.m., he was already dressed, his tie knotted, his shoes polished, though he had nowhere urgent to be. He walked through the silent hallways, noting details that normally brought him pride, the gleaming hardwood, the subtle scent of eucalyptus from the diffuser, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But this morning, all of it felt staged like the set of a play. He was the lead actor, performing a life that suddenly seemed scripted by someone else. When he entered the kitchen, Carla was there, but something was missing. There was no faint melody from the radio, no aroma of coffee. She stood at the counter slicing fruit, her movements deliberate but slower than usual, as if the weight of invisible chains held her back. Her eyes flicked up when she sensed him enter, then lowered quickly. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said softly, her voice even more formal than the day before. Ethan watched her for a moment. "Carla," he began, hesitant but firm, "we need to talk." She froze for just a second before continuing to cut the fruit. "Yes, sir?" He pulled out a chair and sat at the table, leaning forward. "About what happened yesterday. That wasn't the first time, was it?" Her knife paused mid-slice. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock above the pantry door. Finally, she set the knife down and turned to face him. Her hands twisted the edge of the towel nervously. "Miss Parker has her ways," Carla said, carefully choosing words. "She expects a lot. Sometimes more than what's reasonable, but I try not to take it personally." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not taking it personally is one thing, but being humiliated in your own workplace is another. I can't stand by and let that happen." Carla shook her head quickly, almost panicked. "Please, sir, don't make it worse. If she thinks I've been complaining about her, it'll only get harder. I've seen it happen before." The words cut Ethan deeper than he expected. Before. That single word suggested a pattern, years of quiet endurance, layers of humiliation swallowed without witness. He felt a surge of guilt. For 5 years, Carla had kept his home immaculate, anticipating his needs before he even voiced them. And yet he had never truly seen her. She had been invisible, not by nature but by necessity. "Carla," he said softly, "you don't deserve this. You deserve respect. I promise you. Things will change." Her eyes shimmered with a fleeting gratitude, but she quickly turned back to the fruit, masking her emotions. "I just want to do my job in peace," she whispered. The conversation lingered with Ethan throughout the day. At Titan Fit headquarters, he sat in the glass-walled office overlooking rows of treadmills and elliptical machines. His employees moved briskly through the space, their voices rising in energetic pitches, the sound of clanking weights underscoring the atmosphere. Normally this energized him, but today his thoughts wandered endlessly back to Carla's downcast eyes and Lauren's cutting words. He tried to bury himself in numbers, revenue forecasts, expansion plans, marketing strategies. But each line blurred into the next. For the first time, Ethan realized that success in business had made him blind to the subtle failures at home. He had trained himself to spot inefficiencies in supply chains, to anticipate dips in membership retention, but he hadn't noticed the quiet suffering of the woman who worked beside him every day. By mid-afternoon, Ryan called. "How's the perfect life treating you today?" His best friend asked, his voice half sarcastic, half concerned. Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Not so perfect, Ryan." Ryan was silent for a beat. "I can hear it in your voice." "Something happened." Ethan told him everything. The confrontation in the kitchen, Carla's resignation to humiliation, the way Lauren's mask slipped when she thought no one was watching. Ryan didn't interrupt, but Ethan could almost feel his friend's frown through the phone. When Ethan finished, Ryan exhaled sharply. "I knew it. I always said she was too polished, too controlled. That's not real. That's performance. And now you've seen the truth." Ethan rubbed his temple. "I keep thinking, if she can be that cruel to Carla when no one's looking, what else is she capable of?" Ryan's tone hardened. "You need to be careful. People like that don't just flip a switch out of nowhere. If she's been hiding this side, there's probably more beneath the surface." The words sank like stones in Ethan's stomach. That evening, he drove home slower than usual, reluctant to face what waited inside. Lauren greeted him at the door, her hair styled, her perfume faint but unmistakable, her smile as flawless as a magazine cover. She talked animatedly about a dinner invitation, about a new dress, about an upcoming fashion gala. She leaned into him, her laughter sparkling like champagne, but all Ethan could hear was the echo of her voice from the kitchen. "Do you really think you belong here?" At dinner, the table was set with precision. Carla moved silently around them, placing plates, pouring water, never lingering. Ethan noticed how she flinched slightly whenever Lauren's voice rose above a certain pitch. He noticed the way her shoulders stiffened when she reached across the table, as though bracing for another unseen blow. Ethan forced himself to smile at Lauren, to nod at her stories, to play his part. But inside, his resolve was hardening. He couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. Later that night, after Lauren had retreated upstairs to take a call in the bedroom, Ethan wandered into his office. He stood by the window, looking out over the dark expanse of his manicured lawn, the city lights twinkling faintly beyond. In the reflection of the glass, he saw himself, the successful businessman with everything a man could want. Yet for the first time, he admitted to himself he was lonely, and worse, he was deceived. His gaze fell to the safe tucked discreetly behind a cabinet. Inside lay the diamond ring he had purchased for Lauren, meant to symbolize a future he had imagined so vividly. Snowy nights in Colorado, children's laughter in the halls, Christmas chaos. That dream now felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at a touch. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "I won't ignore this anymore. I need to know the truth." The house was silent again, but it no longer comforted him. It felt like silence before a storm, the kind that breaks suddenly, violently, and leaves everything changed. Ethan didn't yet know how far Lauren's mask went, or how deep the betrayal might be. But he knew one thing, with absolute certainty. The life he thought was perfect had cracks spreading across its surface, and soon enough, everything would come crashing down. The following days unfolded like a slow unraveling, each hour tugging another thread loose from the fabric of Ethan Miller's carefully constructed life. The mansion still gleamed, the cars in the garage still shone, Titan Fit still reported profit margins most entrepreneurs would envy. But Ethan's peace of mind was gone. He carried suspicion in his chest now, heavy and sharp-edged, the kind that wouldn't let him breathe fully. On Wednesday morning, he rose before dawn again. Sleep no longer came easily. Even when it did, it came in fragments broken by dreams of raised voices and hollow laughter. He walked quietly through the hallways, careful not to disturb Lauren. She lay in bed with the posture of someone rehearsing tranquility, her hand draped over her phone on the nightstand, as though she might need to defend it even in sleep. Ethan descended to the kitchen. Carla was already there, her back turned, washing vegetables at the sink. She looked tired. The faint circles beneath her eyes told a story she would never put into words. "Morning," Ethan said softly. Carla glanced back with a polite smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. Coffee's brewing." He sat at the table, watching her move about the kitchen. He noticed details he had ignored for years, the way she checked expiration dates on every carton, how she folded dish towels into precise thirds, how she hummed under her breath when she thought no one could hear. There was dignity in her silence, but also resignation, and it bothered him more with each passing moment. Finally, he broke the quiet. "Carla, has Lauren treated you like that before? The way she did the other night?" Carla's hands paused on the cutting board. She didn't turn, but her shoulders stiffened. After a long silence, she answered, "It's not important, sir. I just do my job." Ethan leaned forward. "It is important." "You shouldn't have to endure that." Carla sighed, set the knife down, and turned toward him. "Mr. Miller, I've worked in houses where people screamed at me every day, where they docked my pay for tiny mistakes, where I was invisible. Here, it's better. Miss Parker can be harsh, yes, but I need this job. My mother's health is getting worse and the medical bills don't stop. I can handle Miss Parker." The words hit Ethan harder than any business loss ever had. He saw the truth in her eyes, the quiet suffering of someone forced to endure indignities for survival. He wanted to promise her the world, to tell her she'd never have to suffer like that again. But he also knew promises couldn't erase the years she'd already endured. Before he could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Lauren appeared, radiant as ever, her robe cinched perfectly, her hair cascading in smooth waves. She greeted Ethan with a kiss and Carla with a saccharine. "Good morning, Carla. Thank you for the coffee." The sweetness was a performance. Ethan knew it now. He could see it in the slight narrowing of Lauren's eyes, the imperceptible delay before her smile curved. And he realized with a chill that he could never unsee it. Later that day, after Ethan left for work, Lauren texted him a photo, herself in a designer boutique, holding up a gown. "For the gala next week, thoughts?" XO. Ethan typed back a simple thumbs-up emoji, his stomach twisting. The image felt less like a fiancé sharing joy and more like a chess move, a performance for an audience of one. At Titan Fit headquarters, Ethan tried to focus on a meeting about expanding into Arizona. His managers spoke eagerly about locations, demographics, potential revenue streams. But Ethan's mind drifted. He kept picturing Lauren's face in the kitchen that night, the coldness, the way her words had sliced through Carla without hesitation. He remembered how quickly she had changed masks when he appeared, slipping into her role as the perfect partner. By lunchtime, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He called Ryan. "Meet me," Ethan said simply. They sat in a quiet coffee shop near downtown, a place with worn wooden tables and mismatched mugs. Ryan arrived late, as always, wearing his usual faded baseball cap and a grin that faded the moment he saw Ethan's expression. "Talk," Ryan said. Sliding into the chair across from him, Ethan told him everything, the ongoing tension, Carla's confession about her mother, Lauren's sudden sweetness that felt like camouflage. He spoke in a low, urgent voice, his hands tightening around his coffee cup until his knuckles whitened. When he finished, Ryan leaned back, folding his arms. "Ethan, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Lauren isn't what she seems. And now you know it too." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "I keep thinking, what if this is just the beginning? What if there's more I don't know?" Ryan leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Then find out. Stop living in her version of the story. You're Ethan Miller. You built an empire from nothing. You know how to investigate, how to verify. Do the same at home. Don't just accept what she shows you." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew Ryan was right. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, not just suspect it. That night, back at home, Lauren chatted about a dinner party she wanted to host. Ethan nodded, smiled when necessary, and played along. But later, when she left her phone unattended on the counter, he noticed something. She picked it up and carried it even to the bathroom, something she hadn't done before. His suspicions sharpened. When she finally went to bed, Ethan slipped into his office. His mansion had a full security system, complete with discreet cameras in the common areas. He had installed them years ago for safety, but he rarely checked the footage. Now, for the first time, he pulled up the recordings. At first, the footage showed nothing unusual. Carla tidying the kitchen, arranging flowers, moving silently about her work. Lauren came and went, scrolling her phone, making calls. But then, on one recording, Ethan saw something that made his blood run cold. Lauren entered the kitchen alone, glanced around as if to make sure no one was watching, and then opened a drawer. She slipped her phone inside, closed it carefully, and left. 20 minutes later, she returned, retrieved the phone, and exited quickly. Ethan replayed the clip 3 times, his chest tightening with each viewing. She had hidden her phone. But why? From whom? From him? From Carla? He shut down the footage and sat in silence, the house humming faintly around him. The truth was no longer a distant suspicion. It was here, pressing against him. Lauren was hiding something big enough to make her stash her phone like contraband. The next morning, Ethan acted as though nothing had changed. He greeted Lauren with a smile, listened as she described her plans for the day, and kissed her cheek as she left. But inside, he was already building a plan. Later, he called Ryan. "I need help," he said. "Not advice, action." Ryan was silent for a moment, then said, "I know a guy, discreet, a private investigator. He helped me with a client once. If you want to know the truth, he'll find it." Ethan hesitated only a moment before replying, "Do it. Set it up." That evening, after Lauren had gone out claiming to meet a friend, Ethan met with the investigator in his study. The man was short, sharp-eyed, and direct. He took notes, asked pointed questions about Lauren's schedule, her habits, her friends. Ethan handed over the security footage. I'll find out what she's hiding, the investigator promised. Give me a week. When the man left, Ethan stood alone in his office, staring out at the dark lawn. He felt both dread and relief. Dread for what he might discover, relief that soon he would no longer live in uncertainty. Meanwhile, Carla continued her quiet presence in the house. She moved through rooms like a ghost, careful, efficient, polite. But Ethan saw her differently now. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was the one person who had endured cruelty silently, the one person who had shown him more truth than Lauren ever had. As he watched Carla leave for the bus that night, her simple coat pulled tight against the chill, Ethan felt a surge of respect. She asked for nothing, expected nothing, yet gave everything she had, and in that moment, Ethan realized something profound, the future of his life, the truth about Lauren. The integrity of his home rested not in the woman he thought he loved, but in the quiet honesty of the woman he had almost never truly seen. The storm was coming. Ethan could feel it, and this time he would be ready. By the end of the week, Ethan Miller's life had become a balancing act between two worlds, the one he presented outwardly and the one he was slowly uncovering behind closed doors. Outwardly, nothing had changed. To friends, employees, and even casual acquaintances, Ethan was still the polished entrepreneur with the enviable life, the thriving business empire, the beautiful fiancée, the spotless home. But inside, a storm churned. Each day the doubts grew louder, and each night the unease dug deeper. The private investigator, a man named Victor Kane, wasted no time. He was the kind of man who thrived in shadows, mid-50s, wiry build, a permanent squint from decades of watching what others overlooked. He met Ethan in a quiet steakhouse booth late Friday night. Sliding a slim folder across the table. "This is just preliminary," Victor said. His voice low, "but it's enough to raise flags." Ethan opened the folder, his stomach tight as though bracing for a blow. Inside were photographs, his Lauren, seated across from a man at a cafe in uptown Dallas. The man was familiar, too familiar. Ethan recognized him instantly. Cassius Cass Torres, a former trainer from Titan Fit, the very one Ethan had fired years ago after catching him skimming equipment and cash. Cass had always been charming in a slick, opportunistic way. Ethan had seen through him. He hadn't expected Lauren to see into him. There were timestamps on the photographs, afternoons when Lauren had told Ethan she was in meetings or shopping for event contracts. The smiles in the images weren't the polite smiles of business acquaintances. They were intimate. Cass leaned in, his hand grazing hers across the table. In another, Lauren laughed, her head tilted back, the same laugh she used at galas when playing the role of perfect partner. Ethan stared at the pictures until the lines blurred. "You're sure this isn't just a coincidence? Maybe they knew each other from before." His own words sounded pathetic to his ears. Victor gave him a long, flat look. "Coincidences don't last for 3 separate meetings at 3 different locations. This isn't casual. And there's more. Text records. I can't show you everything yet. I'm still tracing. But let's just say she's not careful with her phone when she thinks no one's looking." Ethan's grip tightened around the folder. His heart hammered, but it wasn't shock. It was confirmation. Deep down, he had known something was wrong. Now the evidence pressed against his palms like iron. That night, he drove home slowly, the city lights smearing across the windshield like watercolors. Lauren was waiting in the living room, dressed in a red silk slip, a glass of wine in her hand, her smile effortless. "Long day?" she asked, curling onto the sofa like an actress hitting her mark. Ethan kissed her cheek lightly, careful not to betray his thoughts. "Exhausting. I think I'll shower and turn in early," she pouted playfully, but he was already moving toward the stairs. He couldn't bear the thought of looking at her too long, not while Victor's photographs burned in his mind. Upstairs, in the dark solitude of his office, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the engagement ring hidden in the drawer. The diamond sparkled faintly in the low light, mocking him. He had imagined placing it on her finger under Colorado snow, her tears glistening as she whispered yes. Now he could only see her hand in those photos, resting in Cass's, the same hand he had planned to claim with a promise of forever. The following days blurred together. Ethan went through the motions, meetings at Titan Fit, phone calls with regional managers, polite dinners with Lauren. But his mind was elsewhere, rehearsing conversations he hadn't yet had, imagining confrontations he wasn't ready to stage. Carla, meanwhile, noticed everything. She always did. She moved around the mansion with her quiet grace, but her eyes lingered on Ethan more now. She saw the way he chewed food without tasting it, the way his gaze drifted toward the floor when Lauren spoke, the way tension radiated from his shoulders like a physical weight. She didn't ask questions, but she adjusted, setting an extra cup of chamomile tea on his desk in the evenings, leaving a blanket folded on the arm of the sofa, small gestures of care that said more than words. One evening, as Ethan returned from the office, he found Carla in the laundry room, folding towels with mechanical precision. She looked up briefly, then quickly back down, as though debating whether to speak. "Carla," Ethan said gently, stepping into the room. "Are you all right?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm fine, sir, just tired." He studied her face. She looked worn, thinner than he remembered, her eyes shadowed. "Is it your mother?" he asked. Carla's lips pressed together, then parted in a quiet admission. "She's worse. The doctors say the treatments aren't working like they used to. I've been taking her to the clinic every other day. It's a lot." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so consumed by Lauren's duplicity that he hadn't realized how much Carla was carrying. "Why didn't you tell me? I could help. With appointments, with bills, anything." Carla shook her head quickly, her hands tightening around the towel. "No, you've already done enough by giving me this job. I can manage." But Ethan could see she was barely holding herself together. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said softly. "Not here. Not anymore." For a moment Carla met his gaze, her eyes shining with something unspoken, gratitude, fear, maybe even trust. Then she looked away, folding the towel with unnecessary care. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, watching Lauren scroll through her phone beside him. She laughed at something on the screen, then leaned over to show him. "Look at this meme. It's hilarious." He forced a smile, nodded, then lay back against the pillow. Inside, he seethed. "Who are you texting when you're not showing me memes? Who are you meeting when you say you're working late?" The next morning, Victor called again. His voice was grim. "I've got recordings, phone logs, messages. You're not going to like what you hear." Ethan met him in the same steakhouse booth. This time, the folder was thicker. Inside were printed screenshots of text conversations between Lauren and Cass. Ethan read them in silence, his chest tightening with each word. "Once he proposes, we're set. He's so predictable. Rich, naive, and boring. Play the perfect fiancé a little longer. Soon it's all ours." The words blurred as Ethan's vision clouded with rage. He turned the pages with trembling hands, forcing himself to see it all. The emojis, the jokes at his expense, the plans to manipulate him into marriage and then divorce. They mocked him, plotted to strip him of half his fortune, laughed at his trust. He closed the folder slowly, pressing it flat against the table as though to contain the fury boiling inside. For long minutes he said nothing. Victor watched, waiting. Finally Ethan spoke, his voice low and steady. "I want everything documented. Every message, every meeting, every lie. I don't want to confront her yet. Not until I have every piece of proof." Victor nodded. "You'll have it." Ethan leaned back in the booth, his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. The world he had built, the empire, the home, the relationship, suddenly felt like a house of glass. One stone had been thrown, and now the cracks spread everywhere. At home that evening, Lauren greeted him with her usual practiced warmth. She kissed his cheek, told him about a long lunch meeting, and asked if he wanted to try a new restaurant over the weekend. Ethan smiled, agreed, played the part. But inside, he had made a decision. The game was over. The mask had slipped. And soon, Lauren would learn that the man she thought she could manipulate wasn't as naive as she believed. For now, Ethan waited. He listened. He gathered proof. And in the quiet spaces between her lies, he began to prepare for the moment when he would finally strike, not with anger, not with chaos, but with the cold precision of a man who had spent his life building empires. Because if Lauren thought she could steal his trust, his wealth, his future, she hadn't yet learned who Ethan Miller truly was. Ethan Miller had always believed that control was the key to success. Control over his time, his business, his body, his future. But now, for the first time in years, he felt the absence of it. His fiancée's laughter still echoed through the mansion, like nothing was wrong, while his housekeeper's silence spoke louder than any confession. He walked the halls at night restless, staring at the marble floors that shone like mirrors, wondering how much of his life was reflection and how much was truth. The folder from Victor Kane, the investigator, sat locked in his desk drawer, heavier than any weight Ethan had ever lifted. Every night after Lauren fell asleep, he opened it again, flipping through the photographs and text messages. The evidence was clear. Lauren was playing a long con, manipulating him with a veneer of elegance, plotting to marry him, divorce him, and strip away the fortune he had built from sweat and sacrifice. And she wasn't alone. Gas Torres, the disgraced trainer Ethan had once fired, was her accomplice. Together, they mocked him behind his back, reducing his loyalty to a joke. Yet Ethan did not rage openly. He played the role because roles were familiar to him. Just as he had once played the scrappy entrepreneur charming investors, now he played the doting partner. He kissed Lauren's cheek at galas, held her hand at charity luncheons, smiled in photographs. But inside, every smile was a blade he sharpened silently. One evening, as he returned from the Titan Fit office, he found Carla Jennings kneeling by the fireplace in the living room, carefully polishing the brass trim. She looked up as he entered, her face lit by the glow of the flames. She quickly lowered her eyes, murmuring, "Good evening, Mr. Miller." Ethan set his briefcase down and studied her. "Carla, sit for a moment, please." She blinked in surprise, then slowly stood and brushed her hands on her apron. She perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture stiff, as though expecting reprimand. "You've worked for me 5 years," Ethan began, his voice low and deliberate. "And in all that time, you've never once complained. Not about the hours, not about the workload, not even about—" Carla's lips pressed tightly together. She shook her head. "It's not my place, sir." "It is your place," Ethan countered, leaning forward. "This is your workplace. You deserve dignity, Carla. You deserve respect." "I should have seen that sooner." Her eyes flickered up to meet his, and for the first time in years of working for him, she let her guard slip. "Miss Parker." "She doesn't like me. She never has. I think she sees me as competition." Carla's voice faltered at the absurdity of it, her cheeks coloring. "I'm just a housekeeper. I would never—" Ethan raised a hand gently. "I know. You've never done anything but your job with honesty. If anyone should be ashamed, it's not you." For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire. Carla's eyes glistened, and she quickly turned her face away, pretending to adjust the edge of the rug. Ethan's chest tightened. He realized with a sudden clarity that he trusted Carla more than he trusted Lauren. Carla, who had nothing, gave him everything through her quiet loyalty. Lauren, who had everything, only schemed for more. That night, Ethan poured himself a glass of bourbon and sat in his office long after midnight. He stared at the ring meant for Lauren, then at the folder of evidence. He thought of his late mother, a woman who had scrubbed floors and raised him alone after his father abandoned them. She had taught him to value honesty above all, to never mistake polish for purity. He heard her voice in his mind now, steady and unflinching. "Don't let them use you, Ethan. Don't let them steal what you bled for." The following weekend, Lauren suggested they host a small dinner party. "Just some friends from the fashion circuit," she said breezily, sipping her green juice. "It'll be good for networking, and for us." Ethan smiled faintly. "Of course. Invite whoever you like." Inside, though, his mind churned. He saw an opportunity. Dinner parties were stages, and Lauren loved stages. She would play her role, dazzling their guests with charm. But Ethan had begun writing his own script, one that would end not with applause, but revelation. On the day of the party, the mansion gleamed under Carla's tireless work. The chandeliers sparkled, the silverware shone, and the dining table was laid with pristine precision. Carla moved like a ghost in the background, invisible yet indispensable. Lauren, meanwhile, fluttered from room to room in a designer gown, rehearsing lines of charm as though she were preparing for a Broadway opening. The guests arrived, 3 couples from Lauren's social circle, dripping in jewels and designer suits. They laughed loudly, sipped wine, and praised the house. Ethan played host, pouring drinks and making small talk, but his eyes never left Lauren. He studied her every gesture, every word, every subtle glance at her phone when she thought no one noticed. Halfway through dinner, Lauren excused herself to the kitchen. Ethan followed a few minutes later, his steps silent on the marble floor. From the doorway, he saw her bent over her phone, typing furiously, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. He moved closer, unseen. On the screen, a message draft appeared. "He's eating out of my hand. Cass, we're almost there. Just a little longer." Ethan's breath caught, but he forced himself silent. He turned away before she noticed, his pulse hammering in his ears. Back at the table, he smiled as though nothing had happened, raising a toast to friendship and new beginnings. But inside, he knew the end was already in motion. The next morning, Victor called again. His voice was sharper this time, urgent. "It's worse than you thought. She and Cass are moving money. Small transfers for now, but they're using shell accounts. She's preparing for after." Ethan sat in silence, the weight of betrayal crushing him. Lauren wasn't just planning to leave him, she was planning to rob him, to gut him financially, to turn his empire into her spoils. That night, as he stood in the darkened hallway watching Carla quietly fold laundry, Ethan felt a surge of clarity. Lauren thought she held the strings, but she had underestimated him. He was no naive fool waiting to be destroyed. He was Ethan Miller, the man who had built TitanFit from a dingy room into a multi-state empire. He had fought too hard to let anyone, not even the woman he once loved, take it all away. And now he would fight again. Not with fists, not with rage, but with precision. He would let her believe she had won, let her perform her role to perfection, right up until the curtain fell. And when it did, it would not be Ethan standing exposed. It would be Lauren Parker. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself a thin, cold smile. Sunday mornings in the Miller mansion had always been scripted like a commercial. Sunlight pouring through the tall windows, the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread, Lauren gliding down the staircase in silk, and Ethan pretending to believe the illusion. But this Sunday was different. Ethan woke before dawn, the house still cloaked in silence. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the hum of tension in his chest, like a wire stretched too tight. He knew the performance had gone on long enough. He slipped from the bed carefully so as not to wake Lauren, who slept curled on her side, her phone clasped loosely in her manicured hand like a talisman. Ethan's eyes lingered on it for a moment. That little device had become a weapon sharper than any blade. He left it there, resisting the urge to snatch it away. Timing mattered now more than ever. Downstairs, Carla was already in the kitchen, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, rinsing strawberries at the sink. She looked up as he entered, startled because he rarely came down this early. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "you're up early." "I couldn't sleep." His voice was low, rougher than usual. He moved to the coffee maker, pouring water into the reservoir with steady hands. "We'll have company tonight. I want everything perfect." Carla hesitated, then nodded. She didn't ask questions, she never did, but the crease in her brow betrayed her unease. She had seen enough in recent weeks to know that behind Ethan's calm tone there was a storm. Throughout the day, Ethan prepared for the evening with a precision that reminded him of his early days building TitanFit, when every detail, every handshake, every deal could make or break his dream. He called his attorney, instructing him to be on standby. He asked Victor Kane to deliver the final compilation of evidence, videos, photographs, bank records, and transcripts, all organized into a presentation that no one could dispute. By afternoon, the house had been transformed. The dining table glistened with crystal glasses and silver flatware. White orchids lined the centerpiece, and candles stood ready to be lit. Carla moved quietly through the rooms, polishing, arranging, perfecting. She avoided Lauren, who had spent most of the day upstairs fussing over her dress and makeup, humming as if the night ahead was hers to own. Ethan spent those hours in his office, staring at the velvet box that held the engagement ring he once intended to place on Lauren's finger. He opened it, studied the diamond that caught the light like a frozen star, then snapped it shut. He slipped it into a drawer and locked it away. That chapter was finished. By early evening, the guests began to arrive. Ethan's closest circle filled the living room. His childhood friend Ryan, his business partner Mark with his wife, a few longtime investors, and even his sister Claire, who flew in from Chicago. Lauren greeted them all with dazzling smiles, the perfect hostess. Her laughter rang out, her hand looped elegantly through Ethan's arm, as though their love story was untouchable. But Ethan noticed the flickers, the way Lauren's eyes darted toward the door every few minutes, as if expecting someone else. The subtle taps on her phone she tried to hide beneath the tablecloth, the rehearsed cadence in her compliments. She was performing, but tonight her stage would collapse. After the main course was cleared, Ethan rose slowly from his chair. He tapped his glass lightly, drawing the room into silence. Lauren beamed, expecting perhaps a toast to her or an announcement of their engagement. She leaned closer, whispering, "This is it?" But Ethan's face was carved from stone. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "I asked you here tonight not for celebration, but for truth. There are things you need to see, things I can no longer ignore." Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Lauren's smile faltered. "Ethan," she laughed lightly, "what are you—" He raised a hand, silencing her. He nodded toward Carla, who had been standing quietly in the corner, and she stepped forward with a small remote. With trembling fingers, she dimmed the lights and activated the screen Ethan had arranged earlier. The room fell into a hush as the first images appeared. Lauren and Cass at a restaurant, her hand on his arm, their faces too close. Their laughter intimate. Gasps broke out among the guests. Ethan didn't move. He watched as the slideshow continued. Videos of Lauren entering hotels. Text messages displayed in sharp clarity. "Once he marries me, we're set." "He's gullible." "Cass, we just need patience." Lauren shot to her feet, her face pale, her voice shrill. "This is fake. Someone doctored these." "Ethan, tell them this isn't real." Ethan's gaze cut into her like ice. "Doctored? You think I'd put my reputation, my family, my company on the line without certainty? These aren't rumors. These are facts. You lied, you schemed. You tried to turn me into your mark." She stumbled, her carefully crafted composure crumbling. "It wasn't like that. He manipulated me. Enough." Ethan's voice boomed, final. He turned to the room. "For months, I've lived beside a woman who smiled in public while plotting in private. Tonight I wanted you all here because betrayal should not be hidden in shadows. It should be seen for what it is." Lauren's eyes darted around the room, searching desperately for an ally, but every face stared back in silence. Judgment, disappointment, disgust. Even her own brother looked away. When she tried to approach Ethan, he stepped back. "You have two choices, Lauren," he said evenly. "Leave this house quietly tonight, or I have my attorney file charges in the morning. Fraud, conspiracy, theft, you know what they'll find. Either way, your game is over." Her knees buckled. For the first time since Ethan had known her, Lauren Parker had no words. She grabbed her purse with trembling hands and fled through the front door, her heels clicking against the marble until the sound vanished into the night. The room remained silent until Ethan finally exhaled. He looked at his guests, then at Carla, who stood near the doorway, her face shadowed by candlelight. "I apologize for the spectacle," he said quietly, "but sometimes the truth must be revealed in the harshest light." Slowly, the guests nodded, murmuring their support. One by one, they departed, leaving Ethan alone in the cavernous living room, the echoes of betrayal still clinging to the walls. Carla lingered behind, her hands clasped nervously. "Mr. Miller," she began, but he shook his head gently. "No, Carla, it's Ethan. Tonight, more than ever, I don't want to be just Mr. Miller." For the first time, she allowed herself to meet his eyes without fear. And in that silence, Ethan felt something stir, not romance, not yet, but a fragile trust being born in the ashes of deception. When the last light was extinguished that night, Ethan stood at the window, watching the dark road beyond the gates. He knew Lauren was gone, but Cass was still out there, and men like him didn't vanish quietly. The war wasn't over. It was only entering its next, more dangerous chapter.